Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining our seminar on how to make whiskey shows safer and more inclusive spaces. My name is Becky Paskin, I'm the founder of the OurWhisky Foundation. I'm really thrilled to have you all join us and to have such a brilliant panel about to chat with us all about whiskey shows and beer shows as well. We've got some brilliant perspectives here. The whole discussion will be led by Millie Milliken, our head of content, and she'll do the rounds of introducing everyone in a second. I just wanted to give a bit of background about the OurWhisky Foundation before we kick off. So we are a non-profit organisation and we are set up to support, recognise and empower women working in the global whiskey industry. We are here for the industry and supported by the industry as well. And our remit really is to make whiskey a more inclusive, diverse space that's supportive of everybody. So thank you for joining. Thank you for your support. If you would like more information about what the foundation does and some of the initiatives that we've got coming up, then please go and sign up for our newsletter. You can find the sign up part on our homepage. And if you're just joining this now and you're joining us live, then don't worry if you can't stay for the entirety, we would love you to, but this video will be recorded and it will be on our website very shortly by the end of the week. So you'll be able to rewatch and catch up whenever you like. So again, thank you for joining and looking forward to this amazing session. Millie, over to you.
Wonderful, thanks Becky. And just want to echo Becky's thoughts and just say thank you to all of our amazing panelists who are joining us today and to all of you for tuning in and listening to what I think is going to be a really important and thought-provoking discussion and hopefully move the needle forward when we're talking about whiskey shows. And also we have Frances on here, who I'll introduce in a moment, who is from the world of beer and she runs a fantastic show. And I think it's really great to have an outsider perspective looking into the whiskey industry as well. We have a lot to learn over the next hour or so. Just before we get going, if you have any questions, just pop them in the Q&A box, which is just at the bottom of your screen. I'll be keeping track of those throughout the session, but we'll come to those at the end. So don't worry if I don't address them too early on in the discussion. We'll leave plenty of time to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce all of our wonderful panelists. We have Amanda Ludlow, founder of the Whisky Lounge, Dawn Davies, organiser of the Whisky Show, and Frances Antonio Martineau, founder of Female Brewfest, all the way over in Florida. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Absolute pleasure. I think before we get started, just really quickly, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but if you could all just maybe do a quick whip round and just explain, if people don't know about the shows that you organise, just a quick top line about what they are and sort of what the feel is around them and what people can expect from them. Amanda, if I could start with you, please.
Yeah, well, the Whisky Lounge was founded in 2008 with a very simple mission to turn everybody on to whiskey, and currently we're doing 8 shows, but we do up to 12 shows and around 200 tastings around the UK. We've recently just started work in France, and it's about being an entry level show that anybody, we focus on bringing new people into the category by making it financially accessible, fun, not too snooty, not too stuffy. And we, like I say, we've been doing that since 2008.
Fantastic, thank you. And Dawn, over to you, please.
So I'm part of the Whisky Exchange, and we actually head up 4 shows. We have Whisky Show, we have Champagne Show, we have Old and Rare when we can do it, thanks Brexit. Cognac Show, I have 5. I've just started Rum Show just about a month and a half ago. So all aimed at consumers, each one actually gets a very, very different demographic, but if we're looking at Whisky Show specifically, we're kind of, Amanda does an amazing job at bringing them in, and then we're like, hold on, if you become a whiskey geek, now join us. Hunter farmer. So I'm counting the seconds at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you, Dawn. And Frances, over to you.
Yes, so Female Brewfest is one of the pioneering craft beer festivals here in the States. It was established in 2017, and the mission of the festival is to highlight women in brewing.
Fantastic, brilliant, thank you. And I think it's a really great place to start for this chat. When we ask people to sign up, we ask them a few questions just to kind of get a gauge of what people had experienced and kind of what their experience had been. We've got about 60 people who have registered for this call, which is fantastic. So I thought we'd just pull out, just to start, just to set the scene, just a few stats that we found with what they responded with. So 2/3 of respondents said that they have experienced or witnessed sexism at whisky shows. Almost 3/4 of those who have experienced or witnessed sexism are female, and those who replied with yes to whether they had or not, of those 9 were men and 24 were women, which is also really interesting as well. And I think a good place to start is just to maybe ask what we mean by sexist and misogynistic behaviour. Things like unconscious bias and sexual remarks. In terms of what we mean by those terms, what does that mean to you in the context of a whisky show? What are the sorts of things that we're talking about, or a beer show as well? Amanda, can I start with you, please?
Well, I would see sexism as anything that whether it's me, I think it's a mixture of assumption and unconscious bias, really. So things that would, just the assumption, and it can be silly things like if there's a female exhibitor who doesn't happen to be Scottish, but they're representing a Scottish whisky brand, then the assumption by the male visitor to that stand is that they don't know as much as a Scottish person. And it can be as simple as that through to, some things that are far more, I find personally offensive. But yeah, it's a broad church.
Yeah, definitely. And Dawn, sort of, what about your thoughts on this when it comes to the shows that you run, specifically whisky, but it might change depending on what the show is? What are your thoughts on it?
100%. I think, if we look at this, we have to look at this as how to make shows comfortable for everyone. Whether, some of the things we have issues with is people that have disabilities coming in, and this stands, we have to make sure the ramps are fine to get onto the stands. In Champagne show, it was one of my male staff that got harassed by women. You've got to create an environment which is, yes, fun, yes, educational, but yet doesn't feel uncomfortable for anyone to walk into. So that could be ageism as well. If I look at it, half the time when I was starting in the industry, it was actually not necessarily my sex. It was that I was wine first. It was that I wasn't French and I was young. That was the 2 biggest issues I faced.
Yeah.
So, I think it is anything where you have a prejudice towards someone based on physical characteristic.
Yeah. And Francis, what you do with female briefers is fantastic, and the exhibitors are women and women who make beer. When it comes to these terms like sexist and misogynistic behaviour, and when you were thinking of setting up the show, what were you kind of seeing? How are you seeing those things play out in the beer space?
Right. Well, I was going to say the same thing. Just people assuming that women don't like beer or whiskey, when about 70% of the women, the people that attend my craft beer festival are women. And it's just funny that I actually got my husband into beer. So, but yeah, just assuming, that just because you're a woman that you don't have the knowledge, or you might want like a girly drink and that kind of thing. Just assumptions is like it's a big thing. Yeah.
Brilliant. And as Becky mentioned, we're kind of approaching whisky show season, and sort of silly season. This is going to be a busy few months for the drinks industry towards the end of 2022. And there have been some shows that have already happened, and these types of sexist and misogynistic behaviour of some attendees at these shows towards predominantly female guests and exhibitors has been a topic of debate recently in public, on Twitter, usually on social media. what are your thoughts of the status quo when it comes to the perception of whiskey shows, or shows that are, you know, perceived to be aimed at men? What do you think those environments, people perceive those environments to be for women? Dawn, have you got any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
100%. I mean, something that we've worked very hard on in the last couple of years is trying to bring more women into the whiskey category. You know, I'd be dumb myself if I wasn't trying harder. I wouldn't be a good role model at all. But I think for us, the scene is changing. It's changing slowly, and there are still issues. But, you know, I looked at last year on the Friday, and I was so happy to see, you know, I can definitely see every year a shift that more women are coming in. And that's both on the on-trade side and on the retail side, because I work with both parties. And so I do think there is a shift. Is it happening quick enough? Nothing's happening quick enough. But I think, you know, with more women in positions of power within organizations that are running events, actually, the more chance we have of changing culture and behavior. You know, like, for the last couple of years, I always have women on my team, 100%. Amanda, very much, you know, Frances, very much, you know, with more people like us, the change will happen in a more positive and constructive way.
Yeah, brilliant. And Frances, I thought it'd be interesting just to ask you what your kind of perception of maybe whiskey shows is as well. Obviously, you're coming at it from the beer side, but I'd be really interested to kind of not get a complete outsider's view because you work in the drink space, but what was your kind of perception of maybe whiskey festivals or whiskey shows as being safe spaces for women?
I mean, I agree. Just being able to showcase and highlight other women, you know, other women being able to see females in the industry, it just kind of inspires them and makes them, if you're able to visualize somebody, then you're, you know, you can see yourself being in those roles. So that's kind of like the goal with my festival as well. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Not to worry, it happens to me all the time. Brilliant. And Amanda, in terms of what do you think when you kind of think of whiskey shows in general and sort of 2022, what do you think the perception is at the moment, especially with people who are entry level coming in as they are with the events that you run?
I mean, certainly there is a north-south divide. And so the further south you go, the more mixed it is, the more young people you have, the more women you have, the more diversity. I mean, London this year was just, and Dawn, you were there, so you can back me up on this. I mean, there was every type of humanity at that event, and it was really, really, really lovely to see, because you had every sort of person on the spectrum in terms of gender and ethnicity, and lots of women, which was really, really lovely to see. But then you go further north you go, the more, to use a term that we use, and I apologize for the use of it, but it's used in the industry, sausage fest. It becomes the further north you go. So it is changing. And, you know, certainly Newcastle, Edinburgh will be our most northerly show, but because it's a capital city, it's slightly different. I do think that this year is hard because you have what I would call the COVID hangover. So you have people just happy to be back out again and behaving either really, really well or in a way you've never seen before. So it's really, at this point, it's sort of hard to say. And I think that next year, when we've had a full year of quasi-normality, it'll be much, much easier to see. But certainly in our southern shows like London and Bristol, and Dawn's show is the same, I'm sure you're seeing much, much more diversity in terms of ethnicity, gender, and more women coming into the space, which is wonderful. And I also think what's really, really good is you've got more younger women coming in as brand ambassadors, distillers, and whatever. And they are much less tolerant of the sort of almost unconscious sexism that I would have been part and parcel of my everyday working life, say 10, 12 years ago. And that's really sort of awakening and just going, actually, no, that's not appropriate behavior. And, you know, if we tolerate it, it will continue. So I think that that's also helping to drive some change.
Yeah,
I think
great.
the brands are also bringing more people along that are women. So it's really interesting. Since the first year at Whisky Show, I'll have Lexi Phillips from Jack and Victoria from Uncle Nearest. You know, like, so I think that there's a conscious effort of, you know, pushing people.
Women in the front.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think maybe an extension of that conversation is also making sure those women who are visible and put in those positions are protected and also know how to spot that behavior as well. It's kind of like an all full circle discussion. And I think, you know, case in point, the fact that all of the panelists here are women and organisers of shows is fantastic. So the more we have people in those positions, you know, hopefully the tides will change. And I just wanted to pick up on something that you said, Amanda, and I'll come to Dawn and Frances as well. As organisers, have you ever experienced any sexism or an inappropriate behaviour at a show that you're happy to talk about, or do you know any colleagues who have? I suppose, yeah, I'll start with you, Amanda, just because you did mention that a bit earlier in your career there might have been some of that.
Yeah, but I mean, certainly from a point of view of my own personal experience at shows, I've personally not experienced that because I am a fairly feisty individual. So, you know, you'd really have to be very, very, very entrenched in your misogyny to really want to take me on. But that doesn't mean that I haven't, you know, been called to stands to deal with individuals whose behavior is subprime. You know, so personally, I haven't experienced it at shows, but I've had to deal with customers at events who are not behaving appropriately and or are offensive. So, you know, and I would say that there's very much a north-south divide with that. The more sort of dinosaur behavior goes on, the further north you go. So, you know, and what we do is, you know, we will certainly talk to all of our exhibitors, especially exhibitors who haven't been to a particular event before. We will tell them what to expect in terms of the customer profile, because customers behave differently in different cities. So, for example, in London, if you've got 2,000 people coming to a show, you'd be lucky if there's like 200 waiting before the doors open. In Newcastle, if you've got 600 people coming to the show, all 600 people will be outside the door half an hour before the event opens. So you've got different types of behavior in different places. But what we will also do, we also have a WhatsApp group for our exhibitors. So if anything happens that they're not happy about, they can drop that in, and then one of us is there to support. And I would always talk to the newer exhibitors, especially the newer female exhibitors, and just say, look, you know, if there's any behavior that you're not comfortable with, you do not have to tolerate it, and you should not tolerate it. If you don't feel comfortable to deal with it yourself, then just drop a message into the WhatsApp group, and we will come and we will help you. And that tends to be how we roll. But we will always take feedback from exhibitors post-event and from customers, because we have a rolling survey monkey, which we incentivize both customers and exhibitors to fill out, and we give them, and the exhibitors get a nice massive Glencairn glass, which motivates them to make sure that people are filling in feedback. So we will always do a post-event debrief from that. So, you know, and if something occurs and we need to update policies and procedures, then that's what we do. So it's just a constant rolling evolution as things change and people change.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a couple of points in there that I'm going to pick out on the reporting side of it and the post show, and we'll pick that up in a couple of questions that are coming, because I think they're really interesting and key points and really helpful ideas as well. Frances, in terms of your experience, obviously you're an organizer of your festival. Have you kind of ever experienced, even in maybe outside of the setting of your own festival or at another festival, sort of any assumption that you maybe don't know anything about beer, or any sexism or unconscious bias or inappropriate behaviour while you've been in the industry?
I have not personally experienced any. I haven't had any experiences. I guess just because of how involved I am, a lot of people know who I am. So I haven't received it. And I just wanted to add, I guess, just because of the theme and the mission of Female Brewfest, I believe that the attendees that do come, there's like an expectation, and I just want to say that I'm very proud of my attendees. I always get, I have security at all of my festivals and police officers, and I've always gotten compliments about my attendees, saying how well behaved they are, because the people that come to the festival, they're there to talk to the brewsters, to the women. They're asking questions, they want to learn, and I always say it's not like any other beer festival. It's just, you have to go there to just kind of experience the vibe. It's unlike any other, so I've been lucky in that sense.
Yeah, I think you've created a culture of people already come in knowing that there's an expectation of how they should behave. And I think that leads on really nicely actually to, I'm going to move to you, Dawn, now. In terms of sort of code of conduct, and I know, Frances, I read through yours on your website, and sort of is very clear about the behaviour that will be accepted and things like that. And I was just going to ask, sort of, Dawn, in terms of the code of conduct for the Whisky Show, what do you currently have in place, and what does it cover in terms of sort of specific behaviour, and also explaining what will happen if that behaviour isn't acceptable? What does that look like at the moment for the Whisky Show?
Bad behaviour, you're out. So the code of conduct is on the website as normal. It is then, if you've ever gone to one of our shows, it's literally everywhere. We do make it very visible in the show as well, because actually 9 times out of 10 who reads a freaking thing on the website, they might not even read it there, because people genuinely aren't going to sit and read. So I don't think necessarily a code of conduct is something that anyone's going to sit and read. It is something that then you can say to someone, I have a code of conduct. It clearly states this. When you sign this ticket, you signed up to this code of conduct. Therefore, it is in my right to remove you from this show. I have been hugely lucky. I have had to remove very, very few people, mainly they're drunk. And I think this is something that's very, very important when we're talking about alcohol. Alcohol removes inhibitions. When you're at a festival, you are consuming quantity. Now, what we have to do as exhibitors is manage that intake in a correct and responsible fashion. Because actually, it's many times, if it's a more aggressive case of sexual harassment, it's because someone's drunk and they're a little flirty, because all their inhibitions have gone out the window, and then they think they're the best looking thing on the planet. And, they want to chat up every walking person, So what we have to be very, very clear on, and something, so we have people that are walking around the show constantly. I have security guards as well. If you've ever seen me at a show, I do not stop traveling, and I am watching. I manage restaurants. I have to watch every thing, person, everything. It is the responsibility of the staff that you bring in, and Amanda, as she says, you talk to your staff beforehand. You say, this is behaviour that's acceptable. This isn't behaviour that's acceptable. We always do staff briefing before every single show. I have a team that basically manage areas, because Whisky Show is so huge. I mean, that's something to bear in mind as well. It's 3,000 people over 3 days, and over 100 and something exhibitors. It's more, it's actually 4,000 people now, probably more. So, you know, you have to just be eagle-eyed, you have to be able to make it accessible. And I think actually it's how the organizers walk around and how approachable they are, because actually anyone should be able to come up to me, okay, Dawn in a very bad mood at the beginning of Whisky Show, don't talk to me. Amanda knows what I'm saying. Sure, Francis does as well. But, you know, like, I would hope that, you know, any person that felt in any way, I remember actually one of the girls on my team had a guy that was just a little drunk, and he was just trying to get her number. And she was just like, I'm not happy. I said, I walked down, I was like, and I clocked it. And I said, go, you're needed on the 2nd floor. And I said, sir, she's not interested. Out. And, you know, and I think it's just being very clear, very concise, and all my team know, you know, I'm happy to do the dirty work. It makes me very excited when I can tell someone off. So yeah, I think it's also about how we make sure that alcohol intake is modified or moderated as best we can with water, telling the exhibitors not to allow any more alcohol consumption from that person, especially at the end of the shows.
Thank you. And I think this is probably a good time just to sort of, I know I spoke to you, Amanda, before we came on here, just to ask if you were okay to sort of talk about a specific thing that happened, because as much as, you know, you can have security guards and people can all be aware of what's going on, and you know, you can do all of that work and have that code and conduct in place and things like that, but these things do still happen, unfortunately, at Whisky shows. And I wanted, Amanda, just to have a chat with you about, you know, a recent incident that happened at the Whisky Lounge with a T-shirt that was worn, and it kind of went maybe unreported by exhibitors and people who are attending as well. I just wanted to get your thoughts on kind of what you think that person thought it was okay to come in wearing that, and why it kind of went almost unmentioned throughout, and maybe give a bit of context to people watching as to what the incident was.
So our Edinburgh show was on Father's Day, and we always do Edinburgh the Saturday before Father's Day, so that Eddie, my husband and business partner, has Father's Day in Edinburgh, because he loves Edinburgh, right? So that's why we do our show. It's nothing more strategic than that. That's why we do our show in Edinburgh. Because of COVID and this, that, and the other, we couldn't actually do the show the day before because they had a massive wedding in the assembly room, so we ended up doing it on Father's Day. We, because of not being able to do events and different bits and pieces, we are now down to, you know, but something we would always do anyway. I like to do the door, and I like to see who's coming in, because I never want to, especially on a second session, because we do 2 sessions in the day, I'd never want to port a problem that then our security team has to deal with into the business. So if you can not, you want to see people, you want to thank them for in our case, you want to thank them for holding on to tickets for 2+ years to come to this event. But you also want to see them. And whenever I became aware of this gentleman wearing what I found to be highly offensive T-shirt, it was at the end of a session, and it was just like, I just thought, the people on the door were Eddie and myself. And the reality is that individual had chosen to wear that. He must have known it would cause offence, because otherwise he wouldn't have covered it up on entry. Because I can assure everybody that there's absolutely no way I would let anybody in doing that, because I would simply have just gone, look, I find that offensive. You need to go away and put something else on, because you're not coming in with that on. And that would have been it. As it turned, you know, and then I found out very late on the session that this individual was wearing this T-shirt. I spoke to him on the way out and made him aware that this would have been my policy. But the reality was he was already leaving anyway. And as a consequence of that, we've updated our code of conduct. And it absolutely flabbergasted me, because I've never seen anything like that in, you know, 15 odd years of doing Whisky shows. And the environment where, when we started the Whisky Lounge, because Eddie originally started the Whisky Lounge in 2002, but didn't become a full-time business until 2008. Never seen anything like that. Never seen anything like that. And I just thought, have people's inhibitions been lowered by lack of social contact because of COVID? Are people trying to cause offense? And it was just like, wow. So subsequent to that, I went round all of the, initially, I went round all of the exhibitors, but I chose to go round all the female exhibitors first to say, one, have you seen this? How did it make you feel? And actually, the female exhibitors we had said they had heard about it, but they hadn't personally seen it. The male exhibitors were actually more annoyed than the female exhibitors, which was interesting. But as a consequence of that, we've updated our code of conduct, not only on the website, but on Eventbrite, the ticketing platform we use. Plus, we've added additional sort of checks and balances into our exhibitors pack, just to reinforce to people that this is not, we don't find that acceptable. And I think it's really important to specifically say what we find offensive and what we won't tolerate, rather than just assume that what we find offensive, everyone's going to find offensive. But it just, I was flabbergasted. It's just like, you know, what were you hoping to get out of that? Why would you turn up with something so deliberately provocative? Why would you do that? And also because I'd never seen anything like it before.
Yeah. So how do you think we, and Frances, I'll move over to you for this question. How do you think we actively sort of prevent this behaviour from the get-go? Obviously, we've spoken about code of conduct, but things like, you know, exhibitor training and making sure that all staff are well trained and knowing what to do in that scenario, but also just fostering a culture of acceptance, like it feels like there is at Female Brewfest. How do we foster that culture in the first place, rather than having to respond to incidents after they've happened? So how do we kind of deal with the problem up front and create a nice culture? Frances, how have you kind of done that with your show? What can we learn from you?
I mean, I guess just with all of the work that I've done with the fest, you know, being able to highlight the women and stuff like that, the code of conduct definitely helps with, you know, outlining and just making sure that attendees and participants just understand that, you know, we don't condone any kind of harassment, sexism, and misogynistic behavior. And I guess just as organizers, you know, we have to make sure that we are equipped ourselves, you know, equipped ourselves so that we're able to pass on the knowledge and stuff to like our staff members and participants as well, which is something I'm looking into, as far as like there's like bystander, upstander trainings available, free, available, you know, for anybody. So I've looked into actually partnering with an organization to kind of like create resources and stuff like that to be able to pass on to my volunteers and participants.
That's fantastic. That sounds great. And just remind everyone that we do have the Q&A function. So if anyone has any questions, we've kind of got half an hour left. So please put them in there so that I can ask our panelists at the end. And Amanda, I'm just going to pick up on something that you mentioned before as well about post-show best practice. So, you know, you can do your code of conduct at the beginning, make sure everyone's trained up properly, they know what the situation is and how to deal with incidents. But there might be some things that people don't report on the day because they don't feel they're safe to do so. Maybe they're too busy, or maybe in the moment they kind of just didn't recognize it, and then afterwards they went, actually, you know, that wasn't right and that shouldn't have happened. How do you deal with incidents after your event, and how does that kind of inform your decisions around safety for following year's events as well? Amanda, I'll start with you just because you brought it up, and then I'll move over to Dawn on that question, please.
Yeah, well, we we always want to be trying to improve, to create the best, most fun environment for people to learn about whiskey. So if there's something that is detracting from that, then we want to eradicate it. It's really as simple as that. So, you know, if there's someone that has behaved poorly but somebody hasn't mentioned it, and then when we do our post exhibitors, what we call scores on the doors, which goes out, and then they have a survey which they can conduct, which can be, if they want it to be anonymous, it can be anonymous. Then we will go back, and if it's someone that's behaved poorly or they've done something or whatever, we will do our best to find that individual and then speak to them. And, you know, if necessary, put it in place so that they cannot buy any tickets to come to our events or anything else. We had a scenario where somebody behaved inappropriately, and this is quite a few years ago. So I don't know, I would like to feel like, you know, behavior and culture and attitudes have moved forward, but we actually pursued that individual through Manchester Police. Okay. So we don't take things lightly, and we do act upon it. And it's really important for us, because if the exhibitors don't come to our event, then there is nothing for the visitors to come for. Yeah. So it's really important to us that both exhibitors and customers know that we listen to what they say, and we put stuff in place to you know, to improve things, but also to moderate the less positive things. But like Dawn says, you know, we are feeding people alcohol, and as a natural consequence of that, they may get merry. So you've got to treat people gently. There's behavior that is acceptable and not acceptable. And it's about making sure that you're constantly, like a hamster in a wheel, making sure that that behavior is being maintained and enforced. And if there's someone that is coming over the line, you get them away before they make things worse. But certainly in terms of the customer feedback and the exhibitor feedback, it's really important to us as a small business that the exhibitors know and the customers know we listen to the feedback they give. So we will follow up with emails or phone calls or whatever. And if there's something that's really far outside the realm, like we have been in a situation with one individual where we did pursue him with Manchester Police, but it wasn't a sexist thing, but it just was unacceptable behaviour.
Yeah, but as a model that you can use if that incident would arise in the future. Yeah. Fantastic. And Dawn, what about you in terms of sort of post-show and sort of influencing how you maybe change things or look at the next year, and how what protocol can be put in place? What happens with the whiskey show?
Anyone who runs an event that thinks they did it brilliantly, they didn't. They can learn 100 different things every time. Every time I do a show, I say to my team, we're going to do it better next year. And, you know, that's anything from how you load in to, yeah, of course, what customers say. And we, very similar to Amanda, we do the same things. We ask questions, we have questionnaires that go out. You know, we also talk to a lot of our staff internally, because basically our whole entire office works whiskey show. So, you know, you do get a lot of feedback from internal, which I think is also very, very positive. Of course, we always talk to the exhibitors, you know, that's something we're doing on a daily, weekly basis anyway. And, you know, you have to improve, you have to get better. And I think, you know, it's up to us to do as much as possible to make the customer experience, whoever that customer is, male, female, LGBTI, you know, like everyone, feel like they are allowed to come to our show and have the exact same experience as someone else. And, you know, and I think that's how we've kind of looked at it, changed it. You know, I definitely look at diversity much more when I'm looking at the panels. However, I'm not going to put someone on a panel just because of their sex, because actually you have to have some freaking information, otherwise it's going to be detrimental to the whole point. So, you know, it's just definitely things like that are things we look at a lot more. As I say, my team is pretty roughly split in terms of male female, so I think that gives us quite a nice visibility on kind of that aspect of it, because actually we will have quite a lot of feedback. If anyone does feel nervous or upset, someone will come pretty quick to us from our teams. So, you know, I do think, you know, feedback's vital, otherwise you can't change anything. You're never going to be perfect.
Yeah. And you touched on something there, Dawn, which leads me perfectly on to my next question. A great segue, and just talking about visibility at whiskey shows and beer shows, and it's that whole idea of already creating a atmosphere and a culture where women are recognized and respected in that space. And I think sometimes that does come from having more visibility on panels and things like that. Frances, have you found that kind of your exhibitors are all women, and you're running the show? Do you find that having women as being the people that people are coming to see, do you think that fosters that kind of culture, that accepting culture among the people who come to your festival? Do you think that really helps to kind of bolster that message of, you know, you're here to celebrate the women working in our industry? Do you think that has a big effect on behavior and the kind of culture of your show?
Absolutely. I mean, visibility and representation is important and key. You know, it provides with the vendors, exhibitors, it provides, you know, an amazing network. It creates camaraderie, and with other, you know, with the female attendees, it might inspire them to kind of like get into the industry, or any male dominated industry, to kind of, you know, get foot in the door. And
Yeah.
I personally, you know, starting in the festival in 2017 with like 15 exhibitors, now, you know, over 40, you know, I've definitely seen a growth with, you know, women definitely getting into the brewing industry.
That's fantastic. Yeah, visibility is so important for sort of inspiring people, especially when you're working a consumer show, to show that, you know, you can work in that industry as a woman in a male dominated industry as well. Fantastic. And I'm just going to lead on to kind of my last question, and preface it with some more information that we had from the registration form that I mentioned earlier. We asked people what the one thing they would like to see change at whiskey shows, and we've pulled out some of the recurring answers, the most popular answers from our attendees. So we have greater inclusion and visibility of women hosting masterclasses, on panel discussions, behind stands, and organising shows. A code of conduct or show etiquette that's visible, and I think even more importantly enforced. Bystander training for all staff and exhibitors. A visible protocol for reporting incidents for both consumers and exhibitors. And finally, and it's something we touched on as well in this, greater control over of overconsumption, i.e. more water stations and smaller serves. So I wanted to ask all of you, seeing as we asked our audience, what idea or one idea from this discussion or something we've touched on do you think you might go away with and maybe think more about and think about implementing into the protocols, or things that you already do? Is there one thing that you've maybe thought, right, that's something that I might look into? Dawn, can I start with you on that?
I actually really like the idea of having a point where people can go and put that, you know, I think that is actually something really nice, whether it's something they can do online very quickly that feeds into someone that's, you know, watching it, or I mean, the reception is probably the best place that someone could do that. You know, sometimes they're stuck on a stand there, so they can't. You know, something that I'll probably, you know, I'll sort of, something you could think about a lot more is kind of actually the brief in the beginning, when you actually brief your exhibitors. You know, my guys are with walkie-talkies. We're linked up to security. We're linked up to everyone in the building. So actually the show managers and my area managers could easily be at a station. You know, if someone had a signal or could, as Amanda has like a WhatsApp group, I think if I tried to put 100 exhibitors on WhatsApp, I think I'd probably murder all of them. So, you know, I do think that that's a really, really nice point. You know, actually just listening to those concerns, I think we hit pretty good average. Actually, I'm really proud that actually our batting average on that is pretty high. But I definitely think that's a really nice idea, and one I'll definitely take away.
Great, fab. Amanda, what about you? Oh, you're on mute. I thought we were going to do a whole presentation without that.
Oh, Sammy. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, the bystander training, I think, is something that I think would be really interesting, because I want everybody to feel empowered not to tolerate what I call subprime behaviour. So I think if there's more that we can do to foster that confidence, and, you know, confidence in people, so that they, you know, either feel comfortable to call it out themselves, or they know what to do to get someone else to do it for them, then I think that's potentially very positive. You know, and our bigger shows, we're dealing with 30 exhibitors, not like 150 or whatever it done. So it's easier to do that. And we've, you know, but we've got a different scenario. So you have a lot of people that are new. And what we were doing pre-COVID, especially in the London shows, was what we would call like a whiskey baptism. So we would bring anybody that had never been to a whiskey show before they were let into the show. They were taken and sort of chatted to about how to sample, how to, you know, how to get the best, and less is more, and all that sort of stuff, before they were then let loose. And, you know, explain to them that, you know, this is, in many cases, it's alcohol, it's 46% or above. So there's food there, there's water there, take a break, you're free to come in and out, and all of that sort of stuff. So, you know, maybe that's something that we need to, especially where we've got lots of new people coming to events, that's maybe something that we need to reintroduce, that sort of baptism bit, where we take people that haven't been to a whiskey show before and give them that 15-20 minute introduction.
Yeah, great. That's great. Thank you. And Frances, you already mentioned these resources that you're looking to work on, which sound absolutely fantastic. And I think that's something I'd love to hear more about when you kind of have that in place. Is there anything else that's kind of on your list of things that you're looking to implement in the future to make your festival even more kind of welcoming and safe for women?
So I'm also running around the whole fest, talking to all of the exhibitors, keeping an eye on everybody. But I love the idea of having the WhatsApp, the group chat, you know, just in case, you know, somebody's not able to, doesn't see me or get a hold of me right away, you know, we'll have like a group chat to kind of like be able to keep an eye out on everybody. So that's definitely something I'm going to implement.
Yeah. Open communication, and yeah, the more people who are all keeping their eyes on things, the more people who can catch anything that might be going on. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to quickly look at some of the questions that we've had throughout the session, and we'll run through those. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we'll keep these short and snappy. So we've already kind of touched on this slightly, but one of the questions is, do you think the efforts that the various shows are making to discourage overconsumption is helping to reduce sexism or inappropriate behaviour? Do you think that active way of discouraging overconsumption is helping to reduce inappropriate behaviour? Do you think they're directly sort of linked?
100%, because if you've got a drunk person, as I said earlier, you know, your inhibitions are gone. So you're more likely to act in an inappropriate manner. I mean, we've all been drunk and done stupid shit. Yeah. It's the same principle, but on a, you know, it enhances maybe characteristics that we may not love in ourselves or in others. So yeah, 100%. You know, we only do 1CL pours. We have so much water around the venue, like it's crazy. We give oat cakes all over the shop. You know, we serve a full course meal. You know, we're encouraging, we're also watching, we're making sure people are really kind of, I have to say, you know, I'm really proud. We actually have, for the volume of people through the door, we have very, very low problems. And, you know, that's something that's, I think, credit to my staff, credit to the exhibitors. And I will go at them if I see anyone pouring too much. You know, the hardest one is champagne show, because you can't use pours. And I'm telling you, those poor wine people are like, what is she on? 1CL of champagne. But, you know, you have to. I think it's so important to have, because you don't want someone leaving so drunk they can't get home. Or I was recently at an experience where I was the one that called an ambulance for this girl. They were just going to put her in a cab, and I was like, I don't think so. You know, and you know, like I was astounded by the lack of professionalism in that venue.
Interesting. Amanda, any thoughts from you on that as well?
Yeah, well, we use a 5cl pour. We also a few years ago introduced a thing where we had like a taster session. So rather than coming for 4 hours, they come for 2. So that they can, you know, especially geared towards new people, so they can try it out. We took our customer survey from being a physical thing people could do at stands to being a virtual thing. 1, to save paper, and 2, because we felt that there were some exhibitors who were overpouring to get votes. So we wanted to remove that immediate incentive away from them. So yeah, and I would have to say, like, the general level of inebriation, because we only started back in sort of October last year, has gone down dramatically from where it would be. And I don't know whether that's consequences of sort of really reinforcing the smaller pours, or whether it's because, you know, we've taken away the physical filling the cards out at stands. I'm not sure. But definitely we've noticed in the what have we done now, 7 shows since September last year, that you know, there has been an instance where maybe out of all those shows, we've had to remove 1 or 2 people, which is usually would be normal for an event to have 1 or 2 people. But because we're sort of at an entry level, we do provide food, but it's not included in the ticket. So it's really just, you know, it's back again for me to that baptism idea of really reinforcing to new people that, you know, this is high strength alcohol, less is definitely more, and just policing it to make sure that people aren't overpouring. Because you'll find with new exhibitors, you know, they get very excited and they've got all these people, and then they're like this, and you're just, so you have to
and they keep pouring after last pours.
Yes. So what I've done to stop them doing that is I go round with a drinks trolley after last pour, and in order I get their pours back off them, they have to stop pouring to get their beer.
Oh, you're far too nice, Amanda. I just go, stop pouring now.
Yeah. But I'm not a retailer, you see, so they can come and go, do you know what I mean? I don't have that sway. But yeah, so it's about making sure that the exhibitor is confident, is not being harassed by people to overpour, is stopping when they're supposed to be stopping. The challenge also that you have is a lot of brands over-engineer their bottles, and standard pours don't go into them, so it's really hard, and you can't be at a show with a 10, like a 1cl measure or 15 measure, like measuring it out, like that doesn't work. So it's really just
definitely something we should have a conversation about, people with heavy bottles.
Yes, indeed. I've been working with a brand, and first thing I told them was to get rid of their bottle that weighs almost 2 kilos before they put any liquid in it, and you can't put a pourer into it. So it's like, who's this for? Are you ever going to export it? Does anybody, you know what I mean? But they've spent however many tens of thousands on a mold, so there you are. But anyway, that's a completely irrelevant point. I mean, I think it's just I think that the other big bit is about within society, there's a bigger conversation about making it socially unacceptable to be obviously inebriated. You know, that is a bigger part of it, because there is certainly, I feel, in younger age groups, there's a sort of culture of going out and wanting to become like overly jolly. And I think that there's a bigger conversation around, it's not socially acceptable to be fall down drunk. You know, drink, enjoy, know where your limit is, and stop when you get there. I mean, of course, there are occasions where you get to that point and you just think, sod it and go on ahead. But you shouldn't do that.
Exactly. No, yeah, that's and that's something that, you know, promoting drinking responsibly and having things in place to make sure that people can do that, and water stations and food and things like that, I think is really important. And something that one of the things that have come through, and this kind of touches a bit, you know, this is in sort of Frances's territory a little bit, which is great. They've said that they've experienced sexism from attendees both in the north and south, so up and down the country, from things like, do you actually drink or know anything about whiskey, to being completely ignored and wanting to speak to male colleagues and things like that. And they've said, do you think that any of the sort of whiskey shows, or what the benefits might be of running a female-only whiskey festival or session? Frances, what are the benefits have you seen of running a festival that is, you know, very sort of fit? I know you have men. I know you have men who come to the festival as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's, you know, that it's not open to them. But how have you kind of? It's interesting to sort of have that as a focal point. How have you found that in terms of promoting that atmosphere?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, just the attendees that I found that come to the fest, they're more interested in learning about, you know, the beer, and just like gaining knowledge and just getting more, you know, getting to know the brewsters and stuff like that. So it's become more, I guess, like an educational fest, that rather than just let's drink all that we can, you know, kind of thing. So
yeah, nice. And Amanda and Dawn, sort of female-only whiskey festival or just a session at the festival, what are your thoughts on that?
I honestly believe if we're going to change culture, you change it to make everyone feel included. And by doing things that exclude anyone, you are already perpetuating another problem. So for me, I think it's really, really important to encourage more women to come in. And you can do that in different ways. You can do that in different targeting, or, you know, making it, as you know, we've talked away all along about actually putting more women in front. Like, I have 3 show hosts, Debra and Billy Abbott, which are as beardy male whiskey geeks as you can possibly get, and me. I love rum, you know, and so it's about that. And my knowledge is nowhere near Dave's and Billy's, because they've specialized in whiskey for a lot longer than me. But actually, it's having someone that, like me, who will go and ask questions that are probably a little bit less kind of geek level and actually just more consumer level, that'll help more people come into the industry. So I think it's also empowering people to ask questions to the exhibitors, because I know when I started out in the industry going to events, and as a woman in a very male dominated, I was one of the first female sommeliers in the UK, you know, it wasn't until I started asking questions, and it takes a lot of guts to ask questions. But the minute I asked questions is the minute they engaged with me, because then they suddenly were like, hold on, this is just a person that wants to know something. This isn't a male or a female. I think it's empowering that ability to ask and being more, you know, open and looking at how you can do different sessions. So we do a 101 session now on the main stage most days, because, you know, we are trying to encourage a different consumer and a new consumer. You know, I think there's a lot we can do within current festivals without going down the route. I mean, I love what Frances does, absolutely 100%, but I don't think Frances would ever want just women consumers, because actually, if she just had women consumers, that perception that it's only male brewers would still exist within the men. So actually, it's always better that she has men, so that they see these really strong, amazing women showing them, you know, 2 fingers up, my friend.
Yeah. And I think that leads very well onto my last question, and we've got about a minute left, so I'm going to keep the snappy answers. Would be great just for this last one. This anonymous attendee has said that I think confidence or lack thereof can affect how others perceive you. So speaking from a kind of exhibitor or staff side, do any of you have any tips on achieving that sense of confidence, and how to deal with attendees who maybe don't have faith in your level of knowledge because you're a woman? Amanda?
Just imagine them naked.
No.
But it will it's just that makes it ridiculous. So yeah, then it doesn't, you know, whatever. Sitting on the toilet as well, naked.
Brilliant, brilliant. Lovely. Francis, any thoughts on how to sort of have that confidence and make sure that people who are approaching you kind of don't just assume that you don't know anything about beer? Any tips for that?
I mean, there's no stupid, I mean, I guess there are stupid questions, but just think about it. There's no stupid questions. If it's something, if there's a subject that you're interested in learning, whether how stupid or whatever, you know, you think the question is, just ask it anyways, you know.
Cool. And Dawn?
And I think, you know, it's super important if you're standing behind a stand, because I think that's maybe what the question is also referring to as well, is you genuinely, if you're standing behind that stand, have knowledge than that person and know that. Now, there are always going to be the geeks that know more than you will always know. You just let them go and talk to themselves. They're fine. They're happy. They tell you how important and amazing they are. Just let them go. It's fine. And if you are on the other side and someone is, you know, not listening to you, not talking to you, yeah, there's 30 other brands in the room. Go fucking talk to someone.
Talk to somebody else
that wants to have the conversation with you, because you know what? There's a lot of products out there. And if one brand isn't willing to talk to you and listen to you, there's probably a better one down the road. So, you know, hey.
I agree.
Brilliant.
I
Amazing.
think that's really important. That, you know, confidence comes from knowledge, and you shouldn't really be standing behind the stand if you don't know what the product is.
Yeah. Do your research first. If you
Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's 5 o'clock, so I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much to all of our fantastic panelists for having this discussion. That felt like a very quick hour, but I think we covered a lot of ground. So thank you very much for sharing all your wisdom and your experiences as well. And thank you to all of our audience as well for coming and listening to this talk. As Becky mentioned at the beginning, it has been recorded and it will be on the OurWhisky Foundation website to watch later. We'll be putting it, the announcements of it being live in our newsletter. And yeah, I would just encourage more open conversation about these things. And a couple of people in the Q&A have mentioned, you know, they'd love to share knowledge and any kind of links to code of conducts and things like that. So we will do our best our side to really kind of try and keep this conversation going. This isn't just a one-time conversation. This is something we should be having more often. So thank you very much to everyone again. Lovely to see you all. Good luck with any upcoming events and shows and festivals. And Francis, I think the next time I'm in Florida, I'm going to time it around your event so I can come and check it out because it sounds absolutely brilliant. Love to come along.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely evening and goodbye. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.